My experience with the movie Prey over the past couple weeks has made me feel like a battered 1950s housewife. First, its trailer slapped me across the face because I overcooked the meatloaf, and I thought I was going to hate it from that moment on. But when its best friend named Reviews started talking to me, they convinced me I was completely out of sorts, that despite the bruises it gave me, it was actually really good deep down, and I'd been wrong about it all along. After seeing it, I've realized it's somewhere in between. It may not be bad, but unless I improve my cooking, I don't think it's going to stop taking its day out on me. Prey isn't great, but it's also not horrible. It's not worth the praise, but it's also not worth any hate. It's just kind of there. It's more than a movie that simply exists, but it also shouldn't end up on anyone's end-of-year top 10s. It's undoubtedly an improvement over the last entry in the franchise, and I guess you could make a reasonable argument for why it's the best since the original, but that speaks more to the low quality of competition when comparing it to other films in the series. I try and stay away from using my time to review something I feel just okay about. I try and point you guys towards movies that are great or point out movies to outright avoid, but regardless of the up and down history of the Predator franchise, I still love it and I need to let my opinion be known. Prey is certainly a beautiful looking movie and has no room for bloat with a short hour-and-a-half runtime. It has the coolest Predator design since the original, solid performances, and a simple but solid story. And yet, with all that said, it's so average. First, let's go over the plot. This review assumes you've seen the movie, so fair warning, dear viewer. Prey's setting is the Great Plains in 1719, establishing itself as a prequel but also stands completely on its own. There's no need to watch any of the other movies to appreciate what you're getting out of this one, but there are some throwbacks to the original that are thankfully not over the top, and a nice little callback to Predator 2. We follow a Comanche named Naru, a young woman of the tribe looking to establish herself as a hunter despite her training as a healer. Again, the plot's pretty simple. The Predator arrives for some hunting and puts that shit to the test. Does she walk away triumphantly at the end, or does the Predator end his hunt with her skull as the trophy?
I wonder.
Naru and her dog are hunting for deer, and she mistakes seeing the Predator's ship as a sign to prove herself. There just so happens to be a big-ass cougar that attacked one of the tribe's hunters, so she takes it as a chance to shove herself into the search party. Her brother speaks up for her and allows her to join, and after rescuing the injured hunter, Naru senses there's a lot more going on.
What could it possibly be?
So she goes against everyone's wishes and joins her brother to try and kill the cougar. She ends up wounding it, but gets knocked out in the process, so her brother ends up killing it and he becomes the tribe's war chief instead of her. He even carries the entire cougar back home just slung over his shoulder because
That's fucking toxic.
No one will listen to Naru about her concerns over the weird footprints she found, so she sets out with her dog to try and track it down on her own. There's a few scenes of her practicing with her axe and more examples of how clever she is, including a scene where she gets caught in a massive mud hole that she has to escape from. She later comes across the giant herd of bison that have been completely skinned, and then she's attacked by a grizzly bear. Luckily for her, the Predator shows up to fucking box it 1930s style. Yeah, you heard that right. The Predator fucking fist fights a bear. It might sound stupid, but honestly, it's pretty cool, and I'm just gonna say that right now. After Naru flees, she's found by a group of Comanche that were looking for her. She manages to basically go toe-to-toe with one in a fist fight before the Predator locates her and kills every fucking one of them besides her. She runs away, but wouldn't you know, her foot lands in one place where there's a fucking bear trap. But wait, luck indeed, because the Predator sees this and disappears, so she deduces that it no longer sees her as a threat. Some bad luck immediately follows though, because the French trappers who were responsible for skinning the bison find her and throw her in a cage. And wouldn't you know it, they have her brother too, who they torture in front of her to get her to spill the beans over whatever she knows about the Predator. They end up using Naru and her brother as bait to lure the Predator out, but he shows up and they all realize just how much around this guy likes to fuck. Conclusion? He doesn't. The Predator tears through all the white dudes, Naru and her brother escape due to her quick thinking, and she rescues her doggo by fighting and killing 3 or 4 grown men completely by herself before being shown how to use a flintlock pistol by one of the survivors in exchange for her medical expertise. The Predator shows up again, and her and her brother put up a fight against it before her bro decides it's time for him to be removed from the plot, so the Predator kills him. Naru uses everything she's figured out up to this point to ultimately defeat the Predator, using the medicine she used on others to lower her body temperature so the Predator can't see her. and basically goes toe-to-toe with the fucking thing until it falls into her trap in the same mud hole she fell in before. And using its own weapon against it, it blows its own brains out with its own shoulder dart gun thingy. Then she returns to the Comanche with the Predator's fucking head in her hand, and everyone cheers and she smiles because everything's just going so good for her now. Brother dead, tribe has to completely uproot and move to another location because of the dangers. But hey, at least she proved herself and she's just as badass as she always knew she was. I know I'm making fun of the movie a bit here, but it really isn't that bad. Like I said, it's more just slightly above average. Naru is essentially the focal point for the entire movie, so I'll touch on every part of the film I can, but I'll get right to the nitty-gritty on the question of, is Naru a Mary Sue? If you saw the trailer and had an inkling that this movie was going to be yet another Hollywood box-checking female empowerment movie and that turned you off, your eyes will only half roll into the back of your head in some scenes. Most people anticipated Naru being
strong female character.
I mean, considering where Hollywood is at this point, why wouldn't she be? And then the reviews came out and I was told,
Hey, she's no Mary Sue. She has a journey much more like Ellen Ripley and Sarah Connor.
Now that I've seen it, I don't have the first clue where people are getting that from. Naru is almost a Mary Sue. Ripley and Sarah Connor are two characters that didn't ask to be in the situations they were in. And they also weren't prepared for it. They had no experience or expertise at first in the things they ultimately became great at, and originally had no desire to be there either. Ripley didn't have experience fighting xenomorphs. She worked on a space freighter. Sarah was a waitress before she was thrust into the role of mother to the savior of the world and had to accept that role. She defeated the Terminator in the first movie due to guts and circumstance and a lot of help from Kyle Reese at first. Ripley narrowly escaped the xenomorph in the first Alien. Both of these characters became complete badasses later on in the series, and their arcs are so satisfying because the progression felt earned. I don't feel like that applies to Naru whatsoever. She doesn't just desire to be in the middle of everything, she'll actively protest and avoid everyone else's opinions and suggestions because she and she alone knows best. She is quite literally never proven wrong, and the one time you think she is, when she was knocked out during the hunt for the cougar at the beginning, her brother ultimately admits it was her that really defeated it and she was right all along. She has a lot of skill as a healer and tracker, which is understandable because that's how she was raised. But she's also somehow able to not only fight, but fight and kill multiple people who are all twice her size at one time, and then actually go toe-to-toe with a predator. Plot armor galore here. The predator knocks a fucking bear out with a punch and guts it, holding it over its fucking head. But when it chokeslams Naru so hard it'd give the Undertaker nightmares.
If he throws him up on the other side, that's it, he's dead.
It's just an inconvenience. There are some scenes of her practicing throwing her hatchet and hunting, but I didn't feel like those short instances were nearly enough to show her evolution or growth. From start to finish in this movie, she's essentially good at everything. With some things that make sense, but others, it's ridiculous. It's like they understood the concept of a Mary Sue and tried to actively avoid it by slapping a couple training montages on her and felt satisfied with themselves afterwards. The term half-assed applies here, and that's too bad because it's so close to something truly great, yet all at the same time, oh so far away. Not to mention the character overall comes off as plain and borderline unlikable at times. She never learns lessons because there are no lessons to learn since she's been right about everything the entire movie. And this is no indictment on the actress portraying her. Amber Midthunder does a great job with what she's given, and with the success of this movie, I look forward to seeing what she does in the future. As for the rest of the cast, there's really not much else to talk about because this movie is basically about Naru, the Predator, and her dog. Everyone else is there to just get slaughtered. Speaking of which, I also don't understand the praise for the gore in this movie. I actually thought that, much like everything else, it was mid as fuck. And I mean literally mid, because most things are done at camera angles from a medium distance away. There were some cool moments for sure, but most of the time I thought they took cool concepts and tamed it down the best they could. Instead of gory close-ups like Dylan's arm being blown off in the first movie, we get dismemberments and disfigurements, but everything is far enough away so that it comes off borderline tame. I might be a fan of schlock slasher movies, but I'm not saying I need gore galore. More just an observation about something I keep seeing lavishly praised but doesn't exactly deserve it. The effects overall are pretty damn good. I was never sucked out of the movie because of them, and this easily could have been a theatrical release. Something else that really deserves the praise, though, is the Predator design. From the look of the creature itself to the design choices with its weaponry, it's by far the coolest thing we've seen since the first. Although, in my book, the original is still the best. I found it a little weird that the Predator's shoulder plasma cannon is kind of a heat-seeking metal dart gun thing now. It's a cool weapon for sure, and the movie takes place 300 years ago, so I guess they wanted to show the Predator's weaponry was a little more primitive too? That's a little far-fetched since they have the tech to travel across the galaxy to hunt for fun, but you can also argue that they have access to the plasma cannon but use weapons they feel match the difficulty of what they're hunting. I also have a small nitpick, and you won't be able to unsee it once you notice it. Sorry. During action scenes, the Predator head is bobbing up and down as the actor moves, presumably because the actor's head stops in the middle of the neck of the suit, and the prosthetic Predator head is basically sitting on top of the actor's head. It reminded me a little bit of older Japanese Godzilla movies when the monsters would battle and the kaiju's heads would be bobbing around like newborn babies. More superlatives for the film, though, are the cinematography and editing. It is a beautifully shot movie, and it's clear they used actual locations for a lot of it, which is very, very appreciated in modern film. It was shot mostly in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and the lush colors really pop on the screen. The film is a pleasure to look at. The editing is also top-notch. The pacing in the film is pretty damn near perfect. I never felt bored, the action scenes were easy to follow, no bullshit quick cuts here, and that's all down to directing and editing choices. Kudos to the team. There's also been some mild talk around the characters using completely English dialogue with American dialects. It's obviously a stylistic choice, and it really didn't bother me. You're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. It's an American-made film, so yeah, you're going to have them speak English for the movie. If they're not going to speak their native language, then it's kind of silly to have them speak English but with native accents. It was easy enough for me to suspend disbelief with the understanding that in the movie they're speaking their native language and we, the audience, are hearing English. I was totally fine with that. While Prey is great to look at and is certainly not a bore, it's also not worth the insane amount of hype it's getting. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's not groundbreaking, but it's certainly not The Predator. I appreciate a good Predator movie just like everyone, but to read something like this? No, it most certainly fucking isn't. Overall, though, after weighing the pros and cons, I'll certainly take another Predator movie if it's the same quality or better as Prey. GG's only.